And the first thing I want to ask you about is I want you to state your full name, and I want you to tell me how you came to Savannah, where your people are from originally, when they came to this country, if you know that, how far back do you know, and a little bit about the path, the journey that you took that got you where you are today.
Okay.
So you start with your name.
My name is Frances Jane Lowery Wilson. And I have lived in Savannah 20 years. I am not a Savannian. I came here from New York, and of course I'm not a New Yorker. I lived most of my life in New York. I am the daughter of Moselle and Samuel Lowery. They were Southerners. My father lived in North Carolina. He's a North Carolinian, and my mother is from South Carolina. My mother's maiden name is Matthew, and I was so blessed to have grandparents on each side of the family. My grandma, Sue Matthews, and I don't know where she learned to read, but was an avid reader. She used to read the newspaper over and over because she didn't have a lot of books, and she would read us stories. My grandmother read to me, not my mother, okay? And on the Lowery side, it was my grandma, Anna, who was part Indian, and I used to love to comb her hair and look at her gray hazel-looking eyes. She used to cook a lot and would make me cornbread, and they lived on a farm. My grandpa, and I call him Grandpa Major Lowery, and he was known as Big Major Lowery because he was a mulatto, and he was a very light-skinned man with gray eyes, and that was significant back then. And he inherited property, and I guess it came from his father's side of the family. And when my mother and father were married, technically they were my grandfather's sort of sharecroppers. They lived on his property in a little house, and they started farming from there. And then eventually they got enough money and Daddy bought his own farm. So I grew up on a farm in a little place called Clover, South Carolina. And I really enjoyed the farm. There I have 5 sisters and 1 brother, and I am the 6th child. And that's a special number for me, and I was special. What made me special, in the way I see it, I was the only child that my mother was not able to breastfeed. So my father would have to go and get the cow and milk her and hold me and give me warm milk. So I became Daddy's baby. And it took years later, my mother and I really bonded, but I was really Daddy's baby because my mother was too sick to hold me. 5 years later, they had another child, and her name is Carrie Elizabeth. And today we are very close. She calls me every morning to see if I'm still breathing, and practically every night. But we were real rivals growing up because I felt like she pushed me out of my spot. And of course I spent good money in therapy getting over that, you know. And I think she did too. Carrie is very successful, never married, but is still very supportive of me and very close. So that's sort of the background. The other thing that's unique about my family, my grandfather, Big Major Lowery, as they called him, he had 6 boys and 1 girl. Aunt Willie was the only daughter that he had, and we gave her a lot of attention. Of those 6 boys, Sam Lowery, which was his son, we are the family that are still intact. None of us has passed on or made our transition. And just last week, I lost 2 cousins. I lost a cousin from Uncle Clayton, which is my daddy's brother, and I lost a cousin from Uncle Otis. So we all sit and we look at each other to say, who's next? It comes in threes. But we feel that we're so blessed that Sam Lowery's unit has not been broken. So that's really unique in its own way. And you know, we talk about it and we contributed to the fact that we grew up on a farm. We had lots of fresh vegetables. We had meals together. We went to church together, and that's very significant. It was very interesting. My mother was a Methodist, a AME, and my father was a Baptist. So when they married, my daddy said to my mother, and I remember my mother saying this, now Moselle, you have to become a Baptist. Not that she really wanted to, but my mother went to his church, and when she died in 1999, October of 1999, she had been a member of Fishing Creek Baptist Church for 60 years, and she sang on the choir. My grandfather's name is in the cornerstone of the church. The Lowerys were very active in Fishing Creek Baptist Church, and of course, this August, I will be going to Gastonia, North Carolina, because my sister Macy Lee, who is the oldest one, she'll be 85 for her birthday. She is the oldest living cousin. So we'll be going to Fishing Creek to honor her. Now my religious journey was, I guess, being in a household where one parent was a Methodist and one parent was a Baptist, and even though my mother went over to the Baptist, I remember joining Fishing Creek Baptist Church when I was either like 11 or 12. And all you had to do to become a Baptist was to walk up to the front and say, I accepted Jesus as my Savior, and then they fellowshipped you in. And then a week or so later, they had this sort of like an indoor swimming pool, but it was on the Beamer. You know, being a little girl now, I look back at it, you'd be dressed in this long white gown, and then they would tie your head up. And I remember Reverend Boynes, and let him rest in peace. I don't know why I didn't drown, because I was scared to death and I couldn't swim. He dunked me in this water, and I became a Baptist. Well, that's what they did. And we went to church every Sunday. And I'm old enough to remember before my father got a car, we went in the wagon with the horses pulling the wagon and the hurricane lamps, and we came back late. The one thing about going to Fishing Creek, as I remember as a little girl, was it was like a family day, and they would make food, and there was a big spread, and everybody would taste everybody's food, and the children would play and go into Sunday school. As a matter of fact, Bertha, who is 2 years older than I, and she is my sister, Bertha Louise Lowery. She's never married. She lives in Gastonia, North Carolina. And we often reminisce about our childhood. And she says, Frances Jane, you can remember so much, and sometimes you can't remember what day of the week it is. I say, when you get our age, that's what happens. But we were talking later the other night, Carol, and we was talking about Easter. Because as you can see, I've not always been Jewish. I'm trying to lead to that journey. I says, you know, Bertha, I remember at Easter, and I says, I couldn't have been no more than 5, and my mother had me dressed, we would call it very light yellow. It was a yellow box pleated skirt, a little yellow knit top with a Peter Pan collar, and I had on Mary Jane patent leather shoes. And I said, my mother taught me my speech. All the Easter bells are ringing, all the children are singing, and Jesus is the resurrection in the life of spring. And Bertha said, how in the world do you still remember that? I said, well, and Mama engraved me, you know, she must have just kept repeating it. I still remember it, you know. And I said that was one day I knew I made her proud, because I can still remember she had taken a pencil and she made water Shirley Temple curls. You know, this just, Carol, you're laughing. And we went to Sunday school every day, every Sunday. So, you know, growing up, as a Christian, I was devoted to going to church. And we lived in a place called Clover, South Carolina. It's where the farmers in the country. And my mother used to like to go to the Holiness Church. That's the Holiness Fire Baptized Bishop Fuller, who was a big time person in the South. And Mother used to go and like to see the people shout and do the Holy Ghost and all of that. But she would take us. Well, I wanted what they had. They seemed to be the happiest people in the world. So I go up one night, and I think at that time, I must have been 13 years of age. And I got on my knees, and I prayed until I got that Holy Ghost. Now, they say I was speaking in tongues. I don't know. But I became holiness, whereas the rest of my family remained Baptist. My mother didn't say anything, and my father said, you shouldn't have taken them there, But my father became very supportive when I announced one morning I got up and I said I'd had a vision and that I had been called to preach. And they were very supportive of me. So I conducted revivals. My last revival was in Kingston, New York with my uncle. And I was paid $300 for the week. And I remember when my father was sick, I still have the letter that he wrote in 1958 from the hospital in Columbia, South Carolina. And he said, Frances, when I come home, I'm going to be your deacon. Okay? Well, that life became just a little too strict for me, and then I realized that people weren't living what they were supposed to be living. I didn't watch TV, I didn't dance, I didn't drink. I was antisocial, and most of the time when my family was going somewhere, I had to stay home or didn't participate. And then when I went off to college, it became even a bigger problem. I had to say to my house parent, I can't do this because of my religion, okay? So then I began to sort of move away from it. And then I got married, had 3 children, and I gave up the Holiness Church, and I became Episcopalian. And boy, did I like that, because, we had wine in the undercroft on Sundays, and Father Stone was the vicar, and they were, the one thing I liked about the Episcopalian Church, they were into education, and I really enjoyed it. Then I started wearing a Jewish star, and I remember at Barbara Scotia College, the way I learned first about Judaism was at Barbara Scotia College, my first year there. I did a paper on Judaism, and my English teacher, I can't remember her name, I see her face, I think it was Mrs. Pope, because her husband was Dr. Pope. She said, this is a very good paper, but why did you write on Judaism? I said, I don't know, but I'm writing about it, I like it. So I was attracted to it, and I didn't buy this Star of David. Someone gave it to me. It's somewhere in the house. I can't find it right now, but I remember Rabbi Belzer saying what a nice Magen David, because it's on a round circle of gold, and the star itself is sort of raised. So I would be at the Episcopalian church trying to cover up my Magen David while I'm sipping the wine, because we all drank from one cup, and I used to try to get to the altar first because I didn't want to drink after people. It was just, I was just all over the place with religion. But then I began to study with a group in Queens. They were black Jews, and they said they were Ethiopian Jews. The gentleman that initiated this group, I think he was an Ethiopian Jew. He was Rabbi Matthews. And, it's interesting. I've been trying to learn Hebrew maybe 30 years now, but I am now successfully reading. And I am very grateful to the Jews in Savannah and the people who have taken the time to teach me. But anyway, I started studying with them, and there they believe that in order to be a Jew, they would just say, come and claim what's rightfully yours, because the lineage comes through the father. So I didn't think anything different. I thought that's what you were supposed to be. And I joined the temple there, Rabbi Levy, and may he rest in peace. And then I met a very nice Jewish man, Bernard Godfirst, and I was practicing Judaism, and he said to me, well, why don't you go to the temple in Forest Hills, and see what that's all about. So I did, and I was a member of 2 temples at one time. I went to Temple Isaiah. It's on the Grand Central Parkway, and Rabbi Perlmutter was there. And that was Reform. And I was a member there, and I was a member at Beth Tefillah in Queens. So that's how I began practicing Judaism, and have enjoyed it. It's a new way of life. It was, we believe in one God. And then when I began to search the literature, and I accepted the covenant. I remember coming here to Savannah, and this was with my second husband, Philip Wilson. He was a Savannaian, and he wanted to come here. I was wondering where I was going to go to service, and I don't know why I didn't go to AA at the time, and I went to BB once, and I didn't go back, but then I went to Mikveh Israel, and that has been my home temple for the last 20 years. It's a warm community. They were Southern Jews, but they have embraced me. I feel like they are my sisters and brothers, and it's home for me. And now I'm a little thirsty for more, so I'm studying at AA with Rabbi Bockins, and I'm learning Hebrew and learning to study Torah. Through many different lenses, he takes us into a deeper study and comparing what the Midrash says and that sort of thing. What else would you like to know?
Oh my gosh.
Why?
What a journey you have been on. What an amazing story. But I need some clarification. Number one is, what did your husband think, your first husband think, when you decided you wanted to become Jewish? And how did that impact your family?
With my first husband, when I became Jewish, we were separated. So it didn't really have a big impact there. I think it did have an impact with the children, but they didn't follow me into Judaism. Only my grandson did, Nicholas. And since I've been down here in Savannah, Nicholas, whom I adopted, has been bar mitzvahed, and he can read Torah. Now, Philip Wilson, who was my second husband, he just thought it was unique, and he had never met a black Jew before, and he was Methodist. So, and he really didn't practice, so it wasn't a problem. The biggest problem was I couldn't keep a kosher house. Philip loved pork, and he loved to cook, and in New York, I did keep a kosher house for a while, Does that clarify?
Yes, but your children didn't follow. How, as a mother, does it feel when something that you believe in is not adopted by your children?
It really hurts, but I tell you what happened. The fact that I was separated from Edward Stewart and we got a divorce, my girls went to live with him for a long period of time, and I only had my son Joseph. who was a special needs child, and he was in a treatment school in New York. So I think that's where the divide came about. Because when I was going to the Episcopal Church, the girls went with me. And then after I moved to Queens, they went to live with their father. And that's, I regret that they didn't come up in Judaism, because my oldest daughter is a practicing Muslim. And she was married to an imam and lived in Yemen for 7 or 8 years. And now she's back and live in Stone Mountain. And matter of fact, she's doing, I think they call it Ramadan right now. Yeah, and her children are Muslims. And my youngest daughter is a Christian, and so is my son. Joseph is a Christian, and Nicholas is Jewish. It's really a mix.
It's United Nations in one family, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So, how did you go from serious, deep belief in the God, the Father, the Holy Spirit, whatever, the Jesus, as a Savior, to the belief in one and only God, and allow all those layers fall away? Do you think you were always Jewish?
Well, I think I was and didn't know it. I think my grandmother was Jewish and didn't know it. Now that I look back at some of the customs that they had, but were indoctrinated as Christians. And how did I do it? It didn't come easy, but I think what happened from the Holiness Church, and I'll tell you, I was a committed holiness person. If they say don't dance, don't drink, don't watch TV, I mean, no fornication, I did all of that. And then when I realized that people in the church were doing all these things, it sort of shattered my, why are they doing this? Why are they saying that this is what you're supposed to do and not doing it?
So what is the belief system that Judaism allowed you into that became relevant to your life as an African American woman before civil rights and before the feminist movement?
And the question is what now?
What is it? What was it that you could learn through Judaism? What was it that attracted you, or that gave you support for who you were as a black woman? What did you gain from becoming Jewish? What were the precepts that spoke to you?
Well, I think the precepts were family, community, and belonging. When I met this group of black Jewish people in Queens and began to study with them, it gave me the anchor that I needed and the environment that I needed to become a Jew. And studying the literature, and then looking at the Immaculate Conception, are there 3 gods? Is there the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost? Just one God. So I think in studying with them, Carol, and first of all, having lost my husband with 3 small children, and then eventually the children, 2 girls went with him, and I had the son. It was what I had to hold on to, and it was very rich, and I felt connected, and I liked the learning part. It was always learning Hebrew, learning Torah, and learning to be a close-knitted family.
Episcopalians are very different from Baptist or Holy Rollers.
That's right.
In that they are very ritualistic.
Right.
Did you recognize some of the rituals that you used in the Christian ceremony in Judaism?
Well, particularly with the Episcopalians, with the wine and the structure. The Episcopal Church was more structured, and I would say more sophisticated than the Baptists. And I really liked the structure that they had, and they were into education. And again, it was a family, like Father Stone used to come to my house. He was into education. My Donna could have gone to a private school, but my husband wouldn't sign it. That he was still my husband, but we separated. He wouldn't sign for her to go to the private school through the Episcopal Church. So I liked that. It was family oriented. And of course, I was in New York, and my mother was in North Carolina, so I needed that family. Mm-hmm.
Being surrounded by Jews in New York,
yes,
is easy.
Yes, it was.
Being surrounded by black Jews in New York is easy.
That is true.
Is it lonely being a Southern black Jew?
Well, for me, no, it hasn't been. I am a person that find my way. Initially when I came here, because Philip was a Savannaian, but I must say the professional black community did not embrace me. They were kind to me. And before we came to Savannah, he called a friend of his. At that time, she was the president of Savannah State, and he said, my wife would like to teach. We're moving to Savannah, and she's going to need a job. So she interviewed me over the phone, and so when I got here, I had a job. And so I had expected that group of people to embrace me. They were kind, and they would call the house and talk to Philip, but I never got into their social clubs. Even to this day, I'm not in their social clubs. So being a member at Mikveh Israel, I became very involved in the temple, and became involved in sisterhood, and became involved with WRJ. Jewish life became my life, and of course going to work.
So normally, I would ask you about racial prejudice and when you recognized that things were segregated and the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
But in keeping with what you just said, maybe the question I should ask you has to do with anti-Semitism. Do you believe that the reason why you don't make headway with the black community in Savannah is they don't understand what it is that makes a black woman become Jewish?
Oh yes, I have run up against that. I think I told this story at Mikveh Israel I was doing a workshop there on diversity, and I had this wonderful beautician. I would go weekly to get my hair done, and at the time we moved down here 20 years ago, they were flipping real estate. And in her church, when you talk to a Southern black about being a Jew, they'll say, how did that happen? You mean you don't believe in Jesus? Don't you know the Jews killed Jesus? So I've had to defend that, and yet I don't think they believe that the Jews didn't kill Jesus, So what happened with her, I wanted to become a part of, it was like a bank that they had in their church. I think they called it a credit union. And you'd put a few $1,000s, and these women were buying a building and they were flipping it. So I said, I would like to do that. I can put into a $3,000. And her name was Felicia, and she said, well, let me ask the group now. So I said, well, okay. So the next week I went back, and she said to me, she said, friend, I'm sorry, you have to be a Christian to be a part of this group. So I did not get into that. So it hasn't been easy. And they see me as being different. I have been discriminated against by my own black people, okay? And on jobs, when I go to a job, I will say to them, I don't work weekends, or I have to have these holidays off. And even the job I have right now, and my director's very intelligent. But she thought it was funny at first. And then when the president of her board became a Jewish man from my temple, then she realized how serious it was. You know, it's not a joking matter. So I don't work any holidays, and I don't work weekends, and yeah, it hasn't been easy being black and Jewish, and you know it's not easy being black. You know, it really isn't. I was a very young woman when it was small babies when they were riding, and I remember putting my baby Donna in a stroller and going on 125th Street, and we were told to take, you know, those old-fashioned can openers that you hook. You take that, and that's your weapon. And I tell you, Carol, I did that one day, and I was so scared, and I said, I'm not coming back down here because something could happen. I was frightened. So I felt badly that maybe I was a coward, and I didn't go back to do the march. You know, I saw it from TV. I felt the pain, and I couldn't understand why they were turning on the hoses on these people and putting the dogs out to get them. You know, it's very difficult, even to this day, processing why someone would hate you just for the color of your skin, or why someone would hate you just because of your choice of religion. So, yeah, I have encountered that. And I remember having dinner one night with Nicholas when he was in school, not realizing that he was having a difficult time. We always would talk, and he started to cry, and he says, you know, Nana, you don't know what I go through at school. They call me a Jew and make fun of me. So that's when I realized that he was having a problem.
How did that resolve itself?
Well, he made it through school, and he got different friends. He was sort of isolated because his problem always been he really did not have a good friend. And I think Rabbi Belzer really understood that. Nicholas did not have a good friend. And of course, he was a child with special needs. And to this day, he really does not have a good friend. But he, like I, sort of find things that keep yourself busy, and you move on. You pay a price to be a Jew. You pay a high price to be a black Jew.
When the civil rights movement was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and there were so many Jewish people that were working for the civil rights movement
Yeah.
because of some of the things that we've been taught
Right.
about equality and minorities, and we are a minority. And
Right.
did you see, do you see now in the things that you have been taught, and it seems like you've always had this hunger, this intellectual hunger for religion,
Yeah.
and that Judaism somehow made sense to you. What's the essence of Judaism that you take with you that helped you get through the civil rights movement, that teaches you something about the feminist movement?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that you see in the good things that those movements created that all along were in Judaism?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what's central to me is being the best person that you can be, and the education, but giving back, even though you may not have a lot, but make use of yourself. Continue to improve your mind and the quality of your life. Use what you have to try to be the best person that you can, and to keep your family together, to educate your children. I'm not sure that answer what you're... And Judaism lays that foundation for you. You know, you have to fight for what you want, but there's a way that you go about fighting for it.
Do your family members, your children and your sisters, brother, did they understand why you wanted to be Jewish? Did you talk to them about it? Were there conversations, or did they accept it, not accept it? I know you're close with your sister.
Eventually, they accepted it. I think it was confusing to them because I came from being a very religious person, a minister. Oh, they held me in high esteem when I was a minister, and they would come to hear me preach, and I even prayed for the sick, and some people got well, but I never thought I was a healer or anything like that. You know, I think they sort of felt that this is just Fran, she's in search of self. And now, you know, they're very respectful of my religion. At this ripe age of 76, they are concerned, and because I've had some health problems, you know, Fran, you know you have that Jewish religion. If you should die, we got to get down there quick. Do you have everything in order? Because we don't know very much about Judaism. And I said, I'm trying to have it all together for you. And don't make a big deal. I'll just be making my transition.
Judaism is steeped in ritual,
Yeah.
and traditions. What's your favorite one? And what is a tradition that you'd like to adopt that you currently are not practicing?
I think my favorite tradition is the Shabbat. I truly believe and try to keep the Shabbat. I'm not saying I've always. It stabilizes the home. And even though I'm by myself, but the lighting of the candles and going through that ritual and saying the prayer and sitting down and having my meal and just to see the candles glow and to say the prayers and to bring in the Sabbath means so much to me. So that's really very important to me. And I think my necklace is still trying to do that, you know. I think the high holy day that I really enjoy is Rosh Hashanah. It's the beginning of the New Year's, a new beginning. And Yom Kippur, although that's a fast, but it gives you time to reflect and renew yourself and to move on to another year and see if you can do better that year than you did the previous year. So, and of course, Jewish education. You know, I never knew what the Jewish people meant by we the people of the book, but I did learn when I was at yeshiva studying for my master's. Those children had the book read, digested before I could get it open. What saved me in graduate school there is that I went in at 50 years of age to get my master's, and I had a lot of experience. And the professor used to say, "Friend, what do you think about that?" And I would give my opinion. He said, "That's it." But I couldn't keep up with him in terms of reading and writing because I didn't have that kind of quality education. But I hung in there and I got my master's, and the children would come to me and ask me questions, and I'm saying, they think I know a lot, you know. So I'm really thirsty for learning, and now that I'm older, I was just saying to somebody, I think I want to cut back on my work because it takes time to read. And I'm reading more, and as you get older, you fall asleep when you read, unless it's a page turner. So I really want to continue to develop my mind and become the best observant Jewish person that I can. I want to try to live a righteous life. And the other tradition that I like is kashrut. You know, I think that's a righteous thing to do. It's also a commandment to try to eat properly. And maybe if I had been eating kosher all my life, I wouldn't have all this weight on. But that may not be true. But it's difficult in the South They get kosher food, but it's now here in Savannah, it has become a little more available. And I'm proud that I have set up a kosher home again. And I catch myself, is this the dairy drawer, the meat drawer? I have to put the signs on them. So it's, you're always learning. You know, you're always improving yourself. And that's the beauty of Judaism. You know, when you read the Torah, and maybe you may be reading the same, we read the same books over and over, but there's a new revelation each time you read it. There's a new insight. You see it through a set of different lenses.
Do you feel that Judaism honors you in some ways as a woman? Or that being a woman is honored by Judaism?
I do. I think the woman is central in Judaism. I know, and it has been in past years, women couldn't do certain things. But the home, and now that I teach a parenting class, you know, the family is so central to the quality of life in a community. Because if families could be healthy, communities could be healthy. And community makes up counties, and counties make up a state. So it all really starts in the home and what you do from day to day, down to what you eat, when you pray, and the structure and values that you implement in your home. I'm not sure that answered your question, because I may have gone off on a tangent.
There are so many things that this has gone over. I'm
It's
really
okay.
enjoying this. And there are so many things that I haven't asked you about, but I'm going to flip it and say,
Yeah.
is there anything we haven't talked about that you really wish I had asked you? Or is there a story about being Jewish in the South, being a Savannian now, or you're never a Savannian, but living in Savannah, being part of this community, getting involved in our ethics, whatever it is there something that we haven't talked about that you wish I had asked you? And go ahead, this is your chance.
Well, I tell you what, coming to the South, to be honest with you, Kara, I had not planned to live below the Mason-Dixon line, being a black person in America, and had lived in the South as a little girl. I remember as a child in my father's house, when the KK was riding, my father would get his 38 Special and go on the front and put my brother at the back door with the double-barrel shotgun and say, if anybody comes on this property, take them down. And I would be in my room so scared, you know, what's going to happen. But they never burned a cross on our yard. He never had to do that. But Daddy would go out and shoot around if they said they were riding. So when Philip said he wanted to come to Georgia, I said, Georgia, are you out of your mind? I said, you know, I married you. I said, I had decided 6 months in New York and 6 months in the Virgin Islands when I retired. And you talk about going to Georgia? You know, I was somewhat reluctant to tell you. And then I love Philip very much. And he said, well, you know, you can teach. I know Savannah. I will get you a job. And you know, he did. You know, he was in that little clique, you know. As I said, I never got in it. So when I came here, I wasn't sure what the Southern Jews were going to be like, you know. And having been raised in the South, I think I was able to make the adjustment. And I found that being a Jew is a Jew. And I remember when I became very ill, and one of the person I thought that might have been maybe a little bit prejudiced, I looked up, and there she was in my room waiting for me. When I saw her today at lunch, she had been sick herself. I said, had you told me, I would have come to the hospital to see you. But I was embraced, and I had said to Rabbi Belzer, because when I came here, what I didn't tell you, I converted. And because I was tired of people asking me, how did you become a Jew? And of course, in the more established Jewish community, this was a Reformed temple, they do go through a conversion. Each sect is a different kind of conversion. So Rabbi Belzer said to me, well, friend, you really don't have to. I said, but I would like to have papers. So I did some more studying with him, and he said to me, you probably know more about Judaism than some of the women that's in the temple, because they have never been to a mikveh. I had already been to a mikveh, and I couldn't understand why they had not been to a mikveh. He said, well, in Reform Judaism, we don't have to do that, But I went to the mikveh, and I remember Belzer saying to me, well, friend, you're starting something else new, because I asked Audrey Balloon and Phoebe to go with me. And, of course, Arlene Belzer was there. So I went to the mikveh, and I remember saying to Rabbi Belzer, well, how will I know that they have accepted me as a Jew? He said, when I take you on that beamer and introduce you to the community, you are a Jew. They will embrace you. And that really happened. That really happened. I feel that if I was in trouble, they would come to my defense. I feel Jewish to the bone.
There's so many different ways I could go with this, but I'm just going to end with one question.
Yes.
Think about all the lessons that Judaism has taught you, all the value that it has given you in your life, which is, I'm not directing the question, these are things that you've been talking about. What is the essence of Judaism that you hope you've passed on to Nicholas and you hope will continue in the future? What is it about Judaism, or what does it really mean to be a Jew?
What it means to be a Jew is that I remember when Nicholas was bar mitzvah, and I had to write a little speech for him, and I said to him, and this is what I still say to him, the Torah is your beacon of light. Study the Torah, it will guide you. Say your prayers, and be the best person that you can be. Always be humble. Watch your tongue. It's a dangerous thing, And my mother said to Nicholas and myself, we talk too much. And that's something that I have tried to control, because the tongue is a dangerous thing. I was listening to a tape that said, God gave us 2 ears, 2 eyes, hand and feet, but 1 mouth. And guide your tongue. Use it to pray and not to gossip. But I think central is, for us, is the study of the Torah and to pray.
That was a beautiful interview. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you, Kara. But I'm sure I must have said some things that probably need to be edited out. My sister and mom said, how could you do something so stupid? Why did you say that? I tried to be honest. And I'm going to tell you something, Kara. A whole lot of stuff was left out. But I would like to write that story. And Marguerite Britt, I don't know whether you know her, Burt is her last name. She was on the board with me at FAAA. And she has written a couple of books, and she says, Fran, just get a tape recorder and start taping it, and I'll write it. You think that's a possibility? Because I don't like sitting there and writing. I think you do.
I think this is a great story. I think it's a biblical story.
Really?
I mean, this is Lech Lecha. This is, go out and become. And this is your story. This is this week's portion.
Really?
God says, not Lech Lecha. This week, God says, we're in Deuteronomy now. God says,
yeah, we are in Deuteronomy.
You've been here long enough. Go.
Yes.
Go.
Because
Moses he's getting a little comfortable now. He's getting a little comfortable. This is enough.
Right.
Enough already.
How long am I going to hold your hand? Yeah.
And you have taken a nugget of information and you've turned it into a lifelong search and for truth, justice, and the American Jewish way.
I I'm not sure I answered your questions the way they should have been answered, but I tried
There's
to
no
be
right or
honest and
wrong. It's all about telling your story. And you
Yeah.
you wove such a beautiful, I mean, the one thing we really didn't talk about was the tapestries.
Yes,
You
the
did a
quilt.
program for
The
us
quilts.
on quilts.
Yes,
And the
yes.
significance of quilts to your family in the black community.
Absolutely.
And it became a jumping off point to do a Jewish quilt.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, would you tell before I shut down? Would you
Yes,
tell that story?
yes,
Go
yes.
ahead.
I don't know how the quilts came about. Carol Greenberg, you were the president of Mikveh Israel's sisterhood, and I think you were going to do a quilt project.
I was going to do a quilt project to
Yeah.
raise money so Sisterhood could give it to the renovations on the temple.
Exactly.
And in order to work on the quilt, you had to buy the right to work on the quilt.
That's right.
And the way I designed it, it's the life cycles and it's the Jewish holidays and the
Absolutely.
significance of the temple and Israel. All right, so
And
what did you do to enhance this project?
And I said to Carol, I come from a family of quilters. I think I got the worst quilts after my mother died. My sister Zenobia had the more beautiful quilts. But I remember as a little girl, and Bertha and I was just talking about this last week, they used to put the frame up in the room. It stayed there. We call them quilting frames. And they would let it down, and my mother and my grandmother and some of her friends would come over, and the quilt would already be together, you know, the back, the batten, and the top part, which would be some kind of design. Then they would do this quilting by hand. And I remember that, and they would cook cornbread and greens and rabbit or whatever kind of meat that they were eating. But my mother had a large collection of quilts, and when she passed away, we divided the quilts up. Everybody got a quilt. And my daughter Donna, who is the Muslim, of course she has changed her name, she has made a quilt for each one of her children. So it's sort of in our blood. And some of the quilts I remember, because we had this open fireplace, and if you, I don't guess you would know, if you observed older black women in the South, they had burnt legs because sitting in front of the fireplace. So my family was smart. You made a little small quilt and you put it over your leg so that the fire, because you was trying to stay warm, wouldn't burn your skin. And I remember that. And I still have my quilts. They're old and some of them are raggedy. But I remember getting a book out of the library on the quilts. This man had gone across the country and interviewed many black people and the people from Ben's Corner. And I have spoken to a lady there. But in this particular book, Nikki Giovanni, who is a poet, and I think she's a professor at one of the universities down south here, she says that she came from a family of quilters, and when she feels depressed or sick, she'll go and get one of her mother's quilts and wrap up in it, and she feels like they are embracing her, and oftentimes she feels much better. So after I read that, and if it's a day that I'm feeling low or feel really sick, I'll go and get one of the quilts, and I know that my mother and my grandmother is in that quilt, and it's really makes me feel very warm. And I look at your quilt, and I'm a docent, you know, on Wednesdays at Mikveh Israel. I think I'm probably the only one that takes people into the dining room to see the quilt, because it's such a beautiful, it turned out to be such a beautiful quilt. And I was very glad to be a part of it.
I remember when you did the talk, you talked about the significance of quilts to the slave experience.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm going to ask you just to mention that. And do you find some comfort in that your two heritage both have a slave story and a deliverance story?
Yeah. The quilts, the strip quilts. And I forgot to say this. You know, I didn't come from a wealthy family. So my mother was very frugal. And what they would do, if I had outgrown a coat or something, they would take old clothes and cut them in different patterns and make the quilts. And some of the things were, they just made a strip quilt. Strips went different ways, and some they made patterns out of them. And to realize that this is a skill that came from Africa, okay, and it was out of necessity, because a lot of the slaves that came here, you know, they stayed in shacks, so they made these quilts to stay warm, and it's a really unique part of my heritage that I'm very proud of. And I do sort of equate. Today, I established something with Rabbi Balkins I'd like to tell you. I told him I wanted to be bar mitzvah. And he said, that's not a problem. You read in Hebrew and you're learning the prayer. And he said, we can do that. So he put me on the calendar for January the 31st. And I said, January the 31st? I said, I'm not sure I can do that. But I would like to do that, because he was saying, my point is, that particular Torah portion, and because I'm a black Jew, it talks about the escape from Egypt and my ancestors having been slaves. It would be a good Torah portion for me. And I thought that was sort of sweet of him to even think like that. And he said, I will work with you, and Davita's working with you. You are reading, you'll be able to do it. Now, I don't have a problem doing the prayers, but I said to him, I'm not sure I can read a whole Torah portion. He said, you don't have to read the whole Torah portion, but in this temple, we'd like for you to read a few lines of it, though. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's a nice way to add an extra level of commitment to your Jewish education. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
This has been fantastic. Thank you.